Hello and welcome to ZalthoLIVE, the podcast featuring Zen Buddhist monk Claude AnShin Thomas, who will share with you his life experiences that includes not only military combat, personal violence, and addiction, but also healing, transformation, and the ongoing joy of everyday life. Please enjoy listening.
The following talk was given on February 2nd, 2021, over a virtual platform at Seattle University. The designated topic of this talk is active nonviolence and the ideas about nonviolence and peace. Please enjoy.
I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. None. I am not going to lecture you. I'm not going to fill up your microphone or fill up your speakers with a lot of Zen speak. And that always stinks a little bit to me. The whole purpose of my committing to this way is, I study intensively. I just finished going through again the Lankavatara Sutra. It is the preeminent sutra guiding Zen traditions. I've made a full study of the Pali Canon. I'm educated. I have a lot of information, Buddhist information. However, that I always ask myself the question: how does this information translate itself into action? And what I think, say, or do is rather irrelevant. It's how I am in the world. If a thing is not practical, it is not spiritual. And so I put myself in a position so that I can become more conscious of the karma which I have inherited. Now, karma is a word it's familiar in the lexicon. I know that. If I ask in a group live, what is karma? Or if they understand karma or have heard of it before, the majority of people will raise their hand. What I have discovered is that what I have been taught is that there are two forms of karma. Karma is the law of cause and effect. A lot of people interpret it literally as what I do comes back to me. If I do something negative, then something negative comes back to me. If I do something positive comes back to me. It's actually a very sort of superficial understanding of karma. Not incorrect, but not in depth. And the way I've come to understand karma is akin to the law of chaos physics. So for every action, there is a consequence. We cannot, however, know when that consequence will manifest itself or to what degree. It may not happen directly to me. It may manifest itself in some other place, at some other time. But I can be sure that for every action there is a consequence. So there's also the karma which I have inherited, and that leads to the karma which I create. Now, I want my life to be different. So I have to let go of my ideas of what different might look like. It doesn't mean I don't have them, but I had to get myself into a space where I stopped clinging to those ideas too rigidly or became too fixed on them. Because then I'm caught in the trap of getting the world to conform to my ideas rather than allowing the world to inform me. Because the world is not how I perceive it. The world is as it is. And I need to put myself in a position where the world can inform me. To do that, I had to embark first on 3 essential practices. I had to stop eating meat, fish, and poultry. I had to stop supporting institutions of killing. I had to stop taking intoxicants and stay stopped. Not one of anything. But the obvious forms. I don't know if it's ever I think it's ever impossible to really stop taking intoxicants. And I had to commit myself to an active meditation practice. Now, when I say active meditation practice, I also want to clarify this. And what I have discovered is that a lot of people have the impression that meditation, they attach the notion of meditation to a particular form, that form being sitting in repose. The way I experience meditation, and that's why I refer to it as active meditation, is that sitting in repose is only a form. It's the root form, but it's only a form. I've discovered that the most powerful tool I have at my access is not my mind, but my breath. That I need to concentrate. I need to develop, or I need to cultivate an active relation with my breath. And I'm taught to breathe in a specific way, and I embrace that, and I pass that on to others. But I also understand it's simply the way I've been taught. It is not the only way, but it has been a way that has supported me. I mean, the topic tonight, I usually have to ask Kenshin, but I have a paper tonight because I'm on Zoom. The topic tonight, active nonviolence in relation to the ideas of peace, nonviolence, and pacifism. I mean, I had to come up with a topic. I don't even know if I'll talk about it. But actually, it's not true. Everything I talk about tonight will be about this topic. So an active meditation practice leads to an awareness of active nonviolence. Active nonviolence as opposed to the idea of nonviolence, as opposed to the idea of pacifism. Active nonviolence, stated simply, says that I know that at any given point in time, I have the capacity to act violently. However, I make a conscious choice to not do that. Now, what supports me into evolving into a place that allows me to have that conscious choice is the cultivation of breath awareness. The root of that is established in sitting meditation. Sitting meditation is the root practice of the tradition I'm ordained in. I'm ordained in a Japanese Soto Zen tradition. I've never been to Japan. The teacher that I studied with, the person who ordained me, and I usually don't call these people out by name, because when I'm here in front of you, when I'm presenting to you, I want you to have a relation with me directly, not have a relation with me that studied with this person or that person. Because what I learned through my study is that up until about the 16th century or 17th century, it was the case that in Buddhist lineages, one never referred to the person they were ordained by or studied with, so as not to build themselves up off the reputation of another. So I make a conscious effort to not do that, and for those precise reasons. I want you to experience me as best you can through the filters of you. Because I know that when you listen to me, when you see me, when you perceive me, it is also colored by the karma which you have inherited. Now, in what I've discovered is that in silence, everything becomes known. Silence, I can't think myself into silence. It's taken a long time for me to cultivate a relationship with silence. I remember when I first started sitting, it was announced in the introduction that I'm a combat soldier. I am a combat soldier, not I was. That doesn't mean that I have been involved in the fighting in Iraq or Iraq or Afghanistan. What it does mean is that that aspect of my life, that incarnation of me, it stays with me. It never goes away. I'm still the child that I was. I'm still the adolescent that I was. I'm still the soldier that I was. Those energies exist in me today, and they are never gone. I wanted at a time to get rid of them. The more I wanted to get rid of them, the more they controlled me, because I was oblivious to how I was, how they wrapped me up and how they dictated the way I perceived the world. What I attempted to do was hide. The way I attempted to hide was through activities that were harmful to myself and harmful to others. You see, I want the world to be different. I want the world to be able to embrace the reality that we live, that we share an interconnected experience, not only amongst each other, but amongst a shared experience with the world which sustains us, the creatures of the world, the plants of the world, the animals of the world. And I do not define myself as an environmentalist. I don't define myself as as ecologically conscious or something like this. It's like I don't define myself. I don't eat meat, fish, or poultry. I don't take intoxicants, and I don't define myself as a vegetarian, because I see too many people wrap themselves up in the ideology of these things and use them as identity. And I want to avoid that. I know the consequences of that. I have experienced the consequences of that. Now, I joined the military at the age of 17. I joined thinking that first I would join thinking there was an I, and that I was the one doing the joining. What I've come to understand after the fact was how I was conditioned, not only by the karma I inherited through family lineages, but through the collective conscious of which I was a part of. I was being pointed in that direction from a very young age. I remember by the time I was maybe 5 or 6, I could already sing the anthems from all 4 major military branches. I am not anti-war nor anti-military. I am pro-active nonviolence. Violence is simply not a solution. And yet I support a lot of people who are actively serving in the military today. They are not the enemies. They are not the problem. I want to be there. I want to present through my actions, not through what I say, but through my actions. I want to present to them the possibilities that there's a possibility to live differently. I was talking to one person just a couple of days ago, and what I said to him is that his world was actually quite small. And he said, "Oh no, from my position," he said, no, the world is really big. And I know that inside the bubble of military and military action, the world really does seem quite big. But I also know that once he steps out of that realm, and eventually you have to step out of that realm, and suddenly the world gets a lot bigger. It's a lot more complex. And so I want to allow them, I want to, through the way in which I live my life, to be an example of the possibilities to live differently. I'm not saying that you have to do it the way I do it. I'm not saying that you have to be a Zen practitioner. I'm not saying that you have to practice meditation. I want to say that there are the possibilities to live differently. If you want to embrace some of these meditation practices that I offer, I'm glad to share them with you. And I'm really clear to pass on to people that it doesn't matter what they think, believe, or say. It just matters what they do. But they just do these simple things. So what are the different forms of meditation? The root form is sitting, and posture is important to that. And so I describe the postures. And then I describe the technique of breathing. Then I say, once we get up off the cushion or the chair, whatever it is that we're sitting in, that meditation doesn't stop there. If we think meditation stops there, then we weren't engaged in the practice of meditation when we were there. So we get up off our cushion, and when we start to move, then we engage in the practice of walking meditation. There is actually formal instructions on that. I know some of you have read the book at Hell's Gate. In that book, there is instructions on these different forms of meditation. Eating is a form of meditation, working as a form of meditation, speaking and listening as a form of meditation. Listening just to listen, not arguing with or debating with what I'm listening to, because if I'm arguing, debating, or coming up with a response to what I'm listening to, I'm not really listening. Ordained in the lineage that I'm ordained in, I took great care to engage with the person who ordained me, and when he offered me ordination, I was skeptical. I've been living as an ordained monk for how long now?
Coming up.
Yeah, I've been living as an ordained monastic for 27 years. And my life as an ordained monastic is not a renunciation, but an embracing of life. But when I was offered ordination, I had to think about that a minute. Well, actually more than a minute, but I had to think about it a bit. My first reaction when I was invited to become ordained, now at the time I wasn't ordained and I was a bit more street heavy than I am now, not so polished in my language, asked him what the F did he want from me. And he looked at me and he said, I really don't want anything from you except to continue to practice meditation and do what you do. It was the right answer, but it wasn't entirely true. There was a lot more involved in it, but there was enough. He was good. He did it enough. So it got me to thinking about this. At the time I had really long blonde hair. It was thinning, but it was long and blonde, and I was sort of avoiding the fact that it was thinning. But I remember asking, so do I need to shave my head? And they said, well, of course. I said, I don't know, man. I was attached. See, the attachment, these simple things like hair, right? I did come to a place with that. As I was contemplating the offer, I was greeted by a number of different reflections. One of the reflections that I was greeted by regarding the shaving of the head was, one, I became aware of how attached I was to appearance. And the second thing I became aware of was that, it's just hair. If I shave it off and I don't like it, it grows back. Well, at least I hope it grows back. So that made that transition quite easy. Then I asked, in the tradition where I'm ordained, people don't generally wear their robes all the time, not generally. Now, as I began to contemplate this more, I discovered through my studies that in the mid-19th century, or sort of the latter part of the 19th century, 1860s in that area, in Japan, there was a dynastic change. With that dynastic change, Buddhism, which had been the national religion, fell out of favor. And Shintoism was adopted because it was seen as more indigenous. I mean, it's not indigenous to Japan, but it was seen as more indigenous. And the new dynasty was leaning more nationalistic. As a result of losing favor, or not being the national religion anymore, they fell out of favor in the imperial courts. They lost access to the money. Temples fell into disrepair. Monks stopped coming for the most part, to the lineages. So it was some civil laws were proposed. The civil laws that were proposed and adopted were that monks no longer had to shave their heads, they could eat meat, and they could marry. What I proposed to the person who ordained me was that if I become ordained, I really want to take the vows as they were before those civil laws were passed, because the civil laws have nothing for me, really had nothing to do, for me, had nothing to do with the monastic commitment. And so the person who ordained me agreed. He said, but I had to do the research, I had to put the things together, and I did that. And so when I'm not a half measure kind of person. I can't do it. So if I was going to take the step into a monastic tradition, then I wanted to do it wholeheartedly. I will also say that one of the guides for me through this process of living as an active monastic was a Catholic Trappist monk, Thomas Mertens. And going through his readings, and I've read him extensively, he was a great model for me. And Mertens was, of course, a Catholic convert. He was born into a Protestant tradition. I had the privilege, this is other interesting. So I joined the military at 17. I finished my military training, and then I volunteered to go to Vietnam. So I volunteered to go into the military, and I volunteered to go to war in Vietnam. I was doing what I believed to be my duty. I went to Vietnam with a infantry specialty MOS, military occupational specialty MOS. And I was assigned to be a door gunner on a crew chief, a door gunner on a helicopter. I'd never seen a helicopter. I'd never been in one. I spent about a month and a half or 2 months as a door gunner in a UH-1D helicopter. And there was a shortage of crew chiefs, and I had a mechanical aptitude. They asked me if I wanted to change my military occupational specialty and become a crew chief, and I agreed. I had the opportunity to transfer out of that unit into an infantry unit, but I tell you, a month and a half into serving in an assault helicopter company, and I was hooked on the narcotic of war. War. This is a quote. Chris Hedges, I think, is his name. War is a force that gives us meaning. It's a brilliant book. And it's Chris that wrote about the narcotic of war. And when I read that, I identified with it. I was so hooked into the adrenaline of it all. I have been forever affected by those decisions that, while I made them, were not my decision. Those decisions were driven by the karma which I inherited. Not only from my family lineages, my father having been a soldier in the Second War, my grandfather in the First War, and back through that lineage, but by the collective conscious of which I was a part of. I was active in competitive athletics. I grew up in a small farming community in northwest Pennsylvania, a place named Waterford. It's just south of Erie. I was a good athlete. I could play hurt. I wanted it's the force that gave me meaning. My father was a school teacher. My father died of his lifestyle. My father was addicted to alcohol. He smoked 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day and had a horrible diet. That was my model. and that's what propelled me into the military, along with the militarization of athletics that drove me into the military, or let's say inspired me to go. And I wanted my life to be different. I just simply didn't know. I didn't know there was a different, and if there was, I didn't know how to get there. I couldn't figure it out. With my intellect, I couldn't think myself into that. I was injured very seriously in Vietnam. I have been responsible for untold number of deaths directly. I know the real cost of war. I live with it on a daily basis. I also connect with people who live with that on a daily basis. The real cost of war is inescapable. Everyone who serves is affected. In some way, shape, or form, we are all affected. And I can say we do not need parades. We do not need yellow ribbons. We do not need flag waving. We do not need thank you for your service. What we need is we need people who are willing to really listen to us. Listen to us, share an unbridled experience, an unbridled to share in an unbridled way our experiences. Not just our experience in combat, but how that combat affected our lives after we came home. The war after the war. I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm not anti-war. I'm not a peace advocate in a traditional sense of the word. Because when I came back from Vietnam, those people who were representative of the peace movement, for me, were just exhibiting another war movement. They saw me, they were spilling their anger onto me because I was all that they had access to. I was the example of the decision making that thrust us into the war in Vietnam, and it's quite simple. I mean, it's quite the same today. If I want the world to be different, I need to live differently. The only way to live differently is to be willing to wake up to the suffering which I have inherited, not only through my family generations, but from the collective conscious I'm a part of. I remember I have had the privilege to speak a great deal publicly. I have taken vows to wander. It means I'm not permitted to be in one place for more than 3 months in a calendar year. COVID has challenged that vow. However, like right now, I'm traveling. I'm in Seattle right now. Although I'm sitting here at the Magnolia Zen Center, I'm now in Seattle. So I just, it's like I was ordained in Poland at the site of a concentration camp. And then I walked from there to Vietnam. And as I was walking through Thailand, I remember having a conversation with a Thai. We were in a Thai monastery, and I was having a conversation with a Thai monk, and they're very strict. They don't eat past noon. But then at night, it was like somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock, they were having hot cocoa and biscuits. And I went, like, what's this? I thought you didn't eat past noon. And he went, oh, no, this is not food, this is medicine. I went, oh, okay. I visited a Thai temple out in California. I was invited there. And I went into one of the huts of a Thai monk there. And there are very strict rules about sleeping, how far off the ground you can sleep and all of that. And one of the monks' bed was like way up high. And I asked him, I said, so wait a minute, what's up with the bed way up there? I said, I thought it was supposed to be only off the floor. He said, well, it is off the second floor. It was an imaginary second floor, but so I just went, oh, okay. This is the lessons that I was learning. Yes, there are these guidance, there are these guidelines, but if I cling to them too rigidly, then they become instruments of suffering. And because I cling to them rigidly doesn't mean that suddenly I'm superior, or that I'm better than, or that I'm more awake, or that I will awake because I follow these things rigidly. It's just like study. The realities aren't here in the book. The answers show themselves to me through an active meditation practice. And meditation isn't what I think it is. It's what shows itself to me through my commitment in as organic a way as possible to the vows which I have committed myself to. And I am fervently committed to these vows, not rigidly, fervently. I don't hold them too rigidly. I allow them to constantly refresh themselves. So I sit every morning. I connect with my breath. And what I've learned is it doesn't matter how long I sit. It matters the intention with which I bring myself to the place where I'm sitting. I really cultivate my breath. And I can share with you in all honesty that I have developed a relationship with my thoughts and my feelings that I have developed the capacity to become the observer of those. I can observe my thoughts. I can observe my feelings. I don't have to. I don't look at them as absolute facts. They don't decide for me. They don't drive me. They don't. I don't reject them. There are days, and I've experienced that through COVID times. There are days where I just hate myself. I've murdered people. Your tax dollars. Most of you, some of you out there, I know at least one of you out there don't pay tax. Your tax dollars paid my salary. You paid me to do that. I want the world to be different. So, the first monastery I studied in, I heard the proposition that the world and self aren't two things. We're not one thing, but we're not two things. I was still quite used to evaluating these things from an analytical perspective, but as I continued to invite more stillness into my life and became able to invite more stillness into my life, I began to understand the truth of that state, the truth which exists beyond the intellect. We can come to a place of understanding beyond the intellect. This I learned also through my study. Then I discovered words to describe that experience. There are two coexisting realms. There is the relative realm and the absolute realm. They are not two things, nor are they one thing. In the relative realm, it's the world of yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad, us and them. In the absolute realm, there is only truth. There are certain natural laws which cannot be violated without consequence. That's reflected to the absolute realm. And I can experience that if I'm willing to just cultivate an active connection with my breath all of the time. it's possible to then just fall right through myself. Nothing changes. The leaves on the tree are still green, although I admit sometimes they look more green than others. I'm still of the nature to make mistakes. I'm still of the nature to spill my tea. It's not an experience that I suddenly transcend, that is super mundane. It's hard to describe. I can only point in the direction. I don't reject my soldierness. I studied and taught martial arts for 27 years. I don't reject that. All of these experiences inform my monastic practice. I came back from the war, and I didn't know how to live at peace with my unpeacefulness. I left the military hospital with 2 primary addictions: narcotics and violence. They are not a good mix. I've been in and out of jail. I've been in and out of psychiatric institutes, and I am not. Well, I gotta say I'm not crazy. I lived homeless on the street for two years. I lived in an alleyway in an abandoned car between 6th Street and Liberty Street in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I thought that was luxurious accommodation. All of that is still a part of who I am. I am not other than that. I am not that, I am not other than that. All of that informs my relationship with the world today. Would I have wanted things to be different? It's a moot point. This is like this because that was like that. Now, as this is, the next will become. If there is a next. COVID has presented me with some incredible opportunities. It was an adjustment. I confess, it was an adjustment for me. I was used to traveling 260 days a year. Suddenly, it was gone. Well, in a sense, it was gone, but it's not gone. Every Thursday, we do a formal sitting here at the Magnolia Zen Center in Mary Esther, Florida. At 6 p.m. Central Time. Every Saturday morning, we do a formal sitting and recitations here at the Magnolia Zen Center in Mary Esther, Florida, at 8 a.m. At 11 a.m. Central Time, I do an open session of questions and responses. And at 6 p.m. Central Time, I do a gathering with former soldiers or active duty, some. All on Zoom. Yes, all on Zoom. So I'm traveling. I mean, I'm going to Colombia, South America. I'm going to Chile. I'm going to Hungary. I'm going to Germany. I'm doing all I'm still traveling. I'm just traveling differently. And it took. But it was an adjustment for me, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, okay. It wasn't that smooth, easy. It was a little bumpy for me in the beginning. Recently, I was involved I support the center here through my labor. They provide my attendant Kenshin and myself a place to live. They provide us food to eat, and I provide them labor. So I support the facilities here. And back in the second week of November, I was involved in a freak construction accident. My left hand was crushed, and they had to amputate a third of my ring finger. I've been involved in a healing process with that, and yet have never missed a beat. I've been present for every sitting, for every question and responses, for every veterans gathering. This way of living, this way, as I'm ordained, this way of living for me is the best in the world. That being said, I'm not a proselytizer. That's another thing that drew me to Zen practice. There's not a tradition of proselytizing. I don't have to believe anything. All they asked me to do was sit down, shut up. That's exactly what the person who ordained me said to me. He was a little more polite, because when I met him the second time, I was anxious, and when I would get anxious, I would talk a lot. I've been able to challenge that talk a lot into more positive experiences for me. But I remember I was sort of rambling away, and he stopped me and he said, "Oh wait, why don't we just sit together for a few minutes?" He said, "It's good if you just learn how to sit down and stop talking." And so we did. We sat, and it's not like I didn't have exposure to that. It was a great support to me, and I have continued to cultivate that. It's a great honor for me and a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to meet with all of you, those I can see and those that I cannot see. Oh, wow. I was just looking in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, and I see that Elvis is attending the talk. That's amazing. I heard that somewhere, that Elvis wasn't dead. It's true. He's there. but really, I want to thank. I have to pull up. I want to thank Jason Worth, Professor Worth. His ordained name Tetsuzen. I also want to thank the Jessica, who I've had primary contact with, and
the director's.
What's that?
Director is Dr. Rodriguez.
Dr. who?
Rodriguez.
Oh yeah, I wanted to thank also Dr. Rodriguez. Actually, I didn't know it was Dr. Rodriguez, which is nice. I just knew it was Jeanette. So I want to thank the staff from Seattle University for giving me this opportunity, because it's a precious opportunity. What will happen now is I will stop talking to you, and I will open this up for questions. However, I want to put a frame around this. If you have a question to ask, Jessica will give instructions on how that will take place, or she's already done that. But please, ask a question, don't make a statement. Keep it short and to the point. Please don't start any side conversations in the chat box. If you don't, I don't have any answers. I'll tell you up front. I will be willing to respond to your questions from a place of my own experience and from my rooting, from my my root in Zen practice. There isn't any question that can't be asked. I will not get involved in political discussions. If you don't agree with something that I've said and you would like to engage with me more, you can write to me. You can write to me at info@zaltho.org. I don't know if I can put that in the chat box or not, but you're willing to write with me. I'm willing to set up a time to meet with you, and we can certainly talk about that point where we can maybe talk about the point where you disagree with me. But I'll tell you in advance, whatever your position is, it's already correct. I'm not going to argue with you. It's just not worth it. Because the moment I start arguing, I start creating us and them. Your people are perfectly willing, they're perfectly free to believe whatever they want to believe. Even though I might think it's not right, you can believe it. No, that's a joke, I'm sorry. Anyway, questions?
Suhaka, would you like to go?
Sure. Thank you so much for your teachings and for your words. Yeah, I really appreciated your teachings. My life has also always been at the intersection of Buddhist practice and nonviolence, so really appreciating your story and your path. And wondering if you could speak to the relationship between dukkha and social change, and how so much of the practice is about accepting things for what it is and not for what we want them to be, but we don't want injustice. And so, yeah, just curious about your thoughts on the relationship between those two things.
Okay. I forgot to mention that when you ask your questions, please, like 12 words or less. Let's keep it short and to the point. First off, dukkha. For those of you who may not be familiar with Buddhist terminology, dukkha is another word for suffering. Now, suffering, I'll define my relationship with suffering. There was a period of time when I was speaking publicly, when I would open it up for questions, somebody would eventually raise their hand and say, and I would call on them, and they would say, what's up with all you Buddhists? All you talk about is suffering. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. And I go, that is suffering. It's our attachment to the idea of happiness that creates suffering. Happiness is a byproduct of being willing to wake up to that conditioning I was talking about that was passed on to us. Now, Kazu, you said the relationship between suffering and what?
Social change.
Social change. You know, I'm cautious about any ideas. I mean, the society is constantly in the state of change. It's constantly changing. I have to be cautious that I don't have sort of fixed ideas about how that social change is supposed to look, what it's supposed to take, how it's supposed to happen, how it's supposed to evolve, but rather be the observer of what is actually happening and changing and being a good steward of that. My willingness to wake up to the suffering which I have inherited, which had me locked in fixed ideas about what social change was supposed to look like, or what the world was supposed to look like, or how other people were supposed to live. I mean, of course, that's one of the reasons I went to war, is because those people over there just weren't doing it right. So suffering gives rise to ideas of, if only things were different, then I wouldn't suffer. And so I encourage people to be actively engaged, that meditation is not something passive or to be hidden away, but to be lived out loud, and to wake up to how we are creating circumstances of us and them all the time. And so let go of ideas of what social change is supposed to look like, and become a steward, become the observer of what is happening, and become a steward of, okay, so what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And just live that out loud. Next question, please. 12 words or less. Yeah, I might give you 14.
Steve, you're up.
What's that now, Jessica?
She called someone.
Oh, I have to
Ask
call
Steve
someone.
to go ahead and
called
unmute. Yeah.
Okay,
There we go.
Genjo.
No, she called someone.
Oh, she called someone. Oh, sorry. I got my ears over here. She's much more attentive.
Let's see. I can.
Hello, I'm a combat veteran, Vietnam infantry.
Steve, okay.
I realized that sometime later I had spent a whole year in fear. I wonder if you've run across that with other vets where they come to that realization, and I wonder what I'm supposed to do with it.
I understood that he spent his entire time in theater.
In theater.
War.
Oh, yes.
Have you met other people like that?
Well, let's see.
And what he's supposed to do with that?
Well, I can tell you that there's nothing really to do with it. What I discovered, I was always involved in either attempting to get rid of how I was affected, the memories that I had, the feelings that I have. I say when I had the accident with my hand, I was transported to the hospital. Now the area that I live in, there's like 7 military bases around here. Eglin Air Force Base is here, and they have active ranges, and they're bombing and shooting all the time, or sometimes more than others. When they took me to the hospital, the person who there was some veterans living here at the center. The person who drove me to the hospital was an 18 Delta combat medic. He'd served 33 years in the military in various theaters of combat. He drove me to the hospital. The nurse that greeted me was prior military. The nurse that put the IV in my arm was prior military. The anesthesiologist assistant was prior military. When they moved me from the gurney into the wheelchair to take me to X-ray, I felt the bullet. I felt the bullet hit me in the back. I felt it. I live with this constantly. This practice that I pass on to others helps me to live at peace with my unpeacefulness. We have a group that meets every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, a group of veterans. You're welcome to join with us, Steve. We would be glad to have you there. There are a few of them here I saw in this meeting. Yes, John Ivins is a part of that group. Paul Martin is a part of that group. We are not alone. And we can learn to live at peace with our unpeacefulness. Yes, I'm still in theater, but I'm not really in theater. Next question.
Yes, and Joe, go ahead.
Hello, brother.
Yo, Genjo, what's happening, man? That's Heavy Zen Speak, by the way.
How are you sleeping?
How are you sleeping?
At night, sometimes.
How's it going? I know that carrying the karmic burden that many of us carry, it's difficult to sleep at night. How is your sleeping?
I haven't slept more than 2 hours consecutively in any night since 1966 or 67. I can't remember the exact year. Sometimes I say 66, sometimes I say 67. I can remember the event, but I don't remember the exact year. In the past, that haunted me. And I did all sorts of things because I believe I had to sleep a certain way. I had to sleep 8 hours a day or there was something wrong with me. I was locked into all these ideas of things. And so I was, the things that I did to get to sleep, I wasn't really sleeping, I was passing out. And then I wasn't really waking up, I was rather coming to. At a certain point, and this evolved for me as after I had lived and studied at the first monastery for 3 years, and then I returned back to that monastery was in France, and then I returned back to the U.S. And at some point after I got back, I was living in a small hermitage. I was washing dishes, and I had this very clear voice of awareness that said to me, "Oh, you don't sleep, so now what?" And it was this great awareness, this great acceptance that there wasn't a fixed way to sleep, but that this is the way I sleep now. So, what is it? Eat when hungry, sleep when tired. And I watch the cats. They're great models for me. So some nights are more challenging than others. But I have I sometimes wake up soaked in sweat, and I have to check and make sure that I haven't been shot, that isn't blood. I still have these experiences, but I have things to do with them today, so that I'm not defective because I have these experiences. They're part of who I am, and I can learn to live at peace with that unpeacefulness. I don't reject them, nor do they define me anymore. It's just a natural course of who I am. But thank you for the question. Next question.
Before I call on the next person, Jason, have you seen anyone raising their hand? No. Okay.
Candy.
Candy, would you like to go?
Thank you. I think I have 10 words. I've narrowed it down to 10 words.
Oh,
All right. Can you speak to your experience from detachment to intimacy?
well, they're not two things. Detachment and intimacy are not two things. I have to be willing to deconstruct the fabric of my life as it was created. So that I can experience life as it's offering itself to me. An example. I'm gonna bring you in here. So this is Vipka Kenshin Anderson. Kenshin is my attendant. Kenshin has been studying and practicing with me for 23 years. I got it right. First off, in Buddhist, let's say if I was studying in another lineage, I'm not supposed to have a female attendant. I will also say that Kenshin's travels everywhere with me. She's been in the war zones with me, in prisons with me, in psychiatric facilities with me. We are essentially inseparable. Kenshin is not my wife. She's not my girlfriend. She's not my concubine. She's not waiting for me to die so she can inherit my money. I'm a mendicant. I don't have any. And I tell you, I could not love someone more. The real gift of intimacy began to show itself when I let go of my ideas of it. There are so many ideas of intimacy that it's painful. And I would never have it. I didn't expect it. But to watch how practice unfolded in my life, and I can also say this. I can also say this unequivocally. Let me see, is Paul there? Paul was there. Are you still there, Paul? Somewhere? Ah, there you are. Got you. And I can say the same thing about Paul Martin. Paul's been a regular attendee at the veterans gathering we do every Sunday here at the Magnolia Zen Center on Zoom. And really, I couldn't love these guys more. And that really evolves out of the place where I have come to acceptance of my own life, just as it is, as it's being revealed to me fresh and constantly every day. Question?
Campbell, would you like to go?
Hi, could you speak a bit more on your relationship with practicing nonviolence and also not necessarily being anti-war?
I could.
May you speak on it?
Oh, I love it. I love it when I do that. I can hear my dad or my mother. I can hear the English teacher doing that to me, and I go, "Oh man, come on." Yes, I would. Just so the question was active nonviolence. To ask the question again, please.
May you speak a bit more on your relationship with practicing nonviolence while also not necessarily being anti-war?
Yes, because I'm anti-war doesn't mean I'm pro-war. And really, if you attempt to sort that out intellectually, you might burn your brain. Practicing nonviolence, active nonviolence means I have the capacity at any given point in time to act violently. I make a conscious choice not to. So I am not any different from the person who is being deployed to Afghanistan, who's being deployed to Iraq, who's being deployed to Africa, who's being deployed to the multiple places where people are being deployed where there is violence happening. I am not different from them. I know that I'm not different from them. If I see myself as different, from the soldier, then I am actually a perpetrator of war. I'm trapped in the idea of nonviolence. I am not actually living the reality of that. Now, that being said, I am absolutely unwaveringly committed to not supporting institutions of war, violence, and suffering. But by being supportive of the individual, I am not necessarily supportive of the institution. So when they meet me, they know what my position is. They know who I am. And I do not see them as the other. That's true also. That can be applied in any number of other areas. Question?
Miles, you're next.
Yeah, I'm wondering how the practice of active nonviolence can apply to people currently experiencing violence, like in cases where their life may depend on responding with violence, such as citizens in war zones or people of color today.
How does the nonviolence apply to people who are currently living in violent situations, who actively use violence to sustain their life, like in war zones?
Yeah. What I can say and what I say to, let's say, people who are living in a war zone or soldiers who are being deployed to a war zone. People who, let's say to women or children who are living in a violent home situation. Any of those situations. I was ordained in Poland. I walked to Vietnam when I walked through the Balkans when they were still fighting there. We were in what's now called Croatia, and there was an enclave in the eastern section of Croatia that was Serbian held, and they had. I met with some Croatian paramilitaries who were they were patrolling that border. I met with him. The guy was drunk. He was drunk. It was a drunk guy running around with loaded weapons. That's not a good mix. But I was sitting talking with him, and he was all wondering about my clothes. He wanted this piece of cloth. This piece of cloth. The name is Rakasu. Rakasu. It's an everyday version in Zen practice. In Zen lineages, this is an everyday version of our formal robes, keza, which is symbolic of the vows and commitments we've made. He said he wanted my raksu. I said he couldn't have it. At that point, he pulled out his 9mm, chambered around, and laid it on the desk, pointed at me. And I said, you still can't have it. I said, oh, wait, that's not true. You can have this if you're willing to take the vows necessary to get it. He said, well, what are those vows? I said, well, you have to stop drinking alcohol. You can't have sex. And I named off a few other ones, and he looked at me and said, well, I can't do that. I said, well, then you can't have the raksu. But I had a mullah. It's some beads that were given to me. They are representative. I don't need to go into that. But I said, what I can do is I can give you this if you would like it. Because he said he wanted to give this as a gift to his girlfriend. I said, but you can't give her this. But I said, but what you need to do, I said, I'll trade you my mullah for the bullet that's in the chamber of your handgun. But I said, what you need to do is you need to take out the magazine, you need to unchamber the round and then give that to me, and I'll give you the mullah. He followed those instructions. I gave him the mullah. And when he put the magazine back in his handgun, I told him, I said, don't forget the chamber round, because he was going out on the border. It doesn't mean that I support violence, but I'm not ignorant to the reality. I'm not going to be responsible for his death. Soldiers simply can't walk away from their combat situation without severe consequences. Some are willing to take those consequences, others aren't. My responsibility is to be clear about my position, let them know that the consequences of their actions will never go away, and that when they step away from that, I will be there for them. And I think that can be said for any number of circumstances where people find themselves trapped in violent circumstances. Really, violence only gets more violence. It's not a solution, even when it appears to be. Next question.
Hannah, would you like to go next?
Yeah. I had a question. Just if someone is conditioned to acts of violence, for example, you had mentioned kids in a violent home, or maybe kids who are in a war zone, or someone who has quite literally been brainwashed into believing acts of violence are the only way to get out of a certain situation. Do you believe it is possible for them to kind of convert to this ideal of nonviolence? And if so, how do you think they can go about that?
Nonviolence is not an idea, and one does not convert to it. For me, the truth of active nonviolence. I'm not talking about the idea of nonviolence. The truth of active nonviolence, and the truth of active nonviolence is not It's not new to me. It's not something that's generated just from me. And there have been other proponents of this reality. It's something that I grew into as I committed myself to wake up to my own suffering by my burning desire to live differently, to understand that yes, our conditioning, each and every one of us. First, I have to see that I'm not different from the people that you're speaking about. And secondly, I need to understand that as I heal also for them. So it's incumbent on me not to focus so much on the other, but rather focus on the other in me. So if I identify that in someone else, what part of my experience allows me to identify with that, and how do I work with that in a more conscious way? That's why it's important in spiritual practice that I have a community of like-minded people that is supported by an authentic teacher or guide. And part of that spiritual practice is in quiet reflection.
The point was, if you think that like child soldiers can make that transition.
And child soldiers can make that transition. I do know them. In fact, I have worked with child soldiers in Colombia.
Do you think it will always kind of be a part of them, or do you think they can truly just completely leave it behind?
We never leave that behind, Hannah. Never. It's a part of who we are. It follows us through the entirety of our life. It's the process is not to get rid of this, but rather to learn how to live at peace with that unpeacefulness. And we can't think our way through that. Yes, so they need that support. There's no PowerPoint presentations. There's no 10 easy steps, although a lot of that is presented. And there's no pharmacological solution to this. But they can, if they want, they can learn to live differently. I know the examples that I share with I have witnessed them and shared some of their transitions with them. So, question. I don't know how much time we have left. 10 minutes. Okay. Next question.
Connor, would you like to go next?
How does one acknowledge and take responsibility for one's life and one's karma while also understanding and acknowledging the doctrine of no self?
Wow. That's a heavy question, Connor. I don't know. Wow. No. seriously, say it again for me slowly. I have difficulty hearing. That's one of the legacies of war for me.
Acknowledging and taking responsibility for one's life
Right, stop.
and one's karma.
Stop. There. You have to want to. You have to want to. Now, second part.
While acknowledging the doctrine, the idea, dare I say, of no self.
Well, first off, no self is not a doctrine or an idea. So if we only have an intellectual comprehension of doctrine and idea, we miss the point. So while these books are important, the major value of them is if it's really cold and the heat is off and I don't have any way to get warm, they can help me start a fire. Last question.
Shudo, would you like to go next?
Who is it? Okay.
Thank you for your teaching.
Shudo.
Active nonviolence is a dangerous activity. Walking is a dangerous activity. And in Japanese, the word for practice and walking is the same. The kanji is the same. Would you say a few words about how your practice of walking shaped your practice of active nonviolence?
Yeah. I don't know if, thank you for the question, Shudo. I don't know that walking informed my practice of active nonviolence. I actually didn't find, for those of you who don't know so much about me, a primary aspect of my practice has been pilgrimage. So I have walked about 45,000 miles around the world. Kenshin has walked 40,000 miles of that with me. I have walked Yonkers, New York to San Francisco. I walked the entire US-Mexican border. I walked from Poland to Vietnam. I walked the border between Switzerland and Italy. And I walked from Budapest in Hungary to Bergen-Belsen. It's a former concentration camp in the northwest part of Germany. It was the trail that was it paralleled the trail that was where the Jews who were rounded up in Hungary were forced marched from camp to camp to camp towards the end of the war. I don't know that informed my practice of active nonviolence as much as it supported me coming to a more conscious awareness of the roots of war and violence in me. And that's what I am ever so thankful for about the experiences that I have had, to wake up to the roots of war and violence in me. If anyone out there in that audience think they are devoid of the roots of war, violence, and suffering, you are deluded. We all possess the roots of war, violence, and suffering. We simply need to be willing to wake up to what they are and how they manifest themselves in our lives and therefore in the world. The moment we see us and them, the moment we start dividing the world up into ideological groups, we are practicing the art of war. So please be cautious about how you think. Active nonviolence, it first came to me. I stopped eating meat, fish, and poultry 40 years ago. But the reason I stopped wasn't for the same reasons I do it now. It's like I was hanging out with the hippie group and doing the kind of things we did, and there were some lovely people in that group that I wanted to know more, so I pretended. But that pretense was actually driven by something rather unconscious. And then I found that pretending evolving into something different. One day somebody asked me, how come you don't eat meat? And it just came out of my mouth without thought, because I don't want to support the killing. And really, I remember when I said it, I started to sweat. Whenever I have that kind of experience, I know that I'm telling the truth. And so the reality of active nonviolence, I think, was endemic, was part of my existence from the time I took my first breath. I think that it could be true for all of us. And I think that, so I can't say that my commitment to active nonviolence informed my pilgrimage, or my pilgrimages informed my active nonviolence. I think that they were just the ways in which my practice showed itself to me. I think one of the reasons that I gravitated to the practice of pilgrimages had a lot to do with the soldier in me, and it's what made sense to me. Living life in such a simple and direct, living life in this direct way. There's nothing simple about it. Living life in this very direct way, and having people committed walking with me. And Shudo, thank you so much for that question.
Thank you for your practice, AnShin Chung.
I think we have now run out of time. Is that possible? Can you ever run out of time?
Yes, we are at the end.
Okay.
Dr. Worth, would you like to close this with a few comments?
I would like to express my deep gratitude to AnShin Sama for clarifying the Buddha way and clarifying our shared mind, and for returning us in a very deep way to original community. Thank you very, very much. You honored us with your presence.
I have a favor to ask before we end the chat. Would it be okay if Kenshin and I did a short closing recitation?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. This is the evening gata. We recite this. We recite this every Thursday and after every session on Sunday. I would use clappers. I won't use them sharply. If any of you have a startle reaction, I won't use them too sharp, and I will telegraph that it's coming, because I know it sometimes can startle people. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly by, and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to awaken. Awaken! Take heed. Do not squander this life. Pleasure to share this time with you. Off to see the wizard. Take care, y'all.
Thank you for listening to this episode on ZalthoLIVE. If you would like additional information, please look at the show notes or visit zaltho.org. That's ZALTHO.org. Our work is made possible solely through donations, so please consider making a tax-deductible gift on our website. We wish you well and thank you.